fun, a little interactive. My expectation is that each and every one of you will walk out of here today having learned something you didn't know. And in all honesty, that's okay, because up until recently, we didn't need to know what we didn't know that we didn't know, but now it's important that we didn't know it. So before you go home today, you're going to know some things. As I said, on 9/11, those of you remember that, I was in Bosnia for my second tour. I got home in October of that year, and 58 days later I was on my way to Afghanistan. And that's when I started really getting into what drives these people. My mission has always been, as an intel guy, to save the lives of friendly, regardless of religion, and to help shorten the lives of the not so friendly, regardless of their religion. And so I got into stuff back in 1995 during my first tour in Haiti. I had a major, when I was giving the battalion commander a presentation in the morning, what's going on around the country, I think I always say, well, what's your source on that? And I have to explain that's a human source. What's his rating? You know, how good is his source? And so I had become very, very ingrained in source material. Somebody says something very intelligent, that's great for me, but if I can't find a source document that validates what that person has said, I may not share with other people, whether it's true or not. Today I'm going to share with you some source document information on the threat we currently face from groups like ISIS. But if we got rid of ISIS tomorrow, the threat doesn't go away and doesn't change. It just gets a new name. So we're going to start with the threat we're facing in the United States. Last 2 years have been 11 attacks in the United States. Each and every one of them was not conducted in a home. They were in a business, at a school, out in the back behind a building, a business somewhere. Each and every one of these was in a place where, as security people, you may have had somebody assigned. Every single one of them. In total, 25 people were killed and only 40 were wounded in 11 attacks across the country in the last 2 years alone. I looked at 2013, there were 6 attacks, and if you take out the Boston bomber, the numbers are roughly the same, so I didn't add that to this. But this is the last 2 years, in places where people you may employ or protect are getting killed and or wounded based on an ideology. I look at source documents. Pew Research has got a very high reputation for what they do. In both 2007 and 2011, they did polls of American Muslims. Is it okay to conduct violence in defense of Islam? Only 1% said often, 7% said sometimes. Interesting, those numbers mirrored each other over a 4-year period of time. So clearly there's some consistency. The only thing that changed is in 2011, a whole lot more said it's never okay. But you do the math, 81 minus 100, you get 19% who said either there is sometimes it's okay, or I'm not going to answer the question. So these are percentages based on the Pew Research. So I looked at, well, what's the population of Muslims in the country? I've seen up to 9 million, and I think the U.S. government has got around 2 million. But again, who's my source? Pew Research, 2011. They said there are 1.8 million adult Muslims in our country. With an additional number of children, it's over 2 million. Here's something I didn't really understand until yesterday when I pulled this up again to look at and share with you. 63% of the Muslims in our country are immigrants. They bring with them, therefore, their values and their social associations between their religion and their society. 37% are Americans with American perspectives, American beliefs, who have converted. 63% have brought their values with them. So, what's driving that? I'm going to tell you today it's something called Sharia law, and additionally, it is in stark contrast to the U.S. Constitution. But there are those who will tell you otherwise.
So 90% of Sharia law is fully compatible, not only compatible, is consistent or compatible with American constitutional law and American laws. The areas of difference are small and minor.
minor.
There you go. Constitution, Sharia law, it's all the same. Minor differences. So, what do Muslims, they meet on the street, do this? Sean Hannity had a guy do a man on the street interview, so I'm not endorsing Sean Hannity. He just happened to have a guy who went to a mosque in New York and asked him some questions. And I only cut out a couple of people that they showed because one guy took a long time to answer the bloody question, and another one repeated what somebody else had already said. So this is about 67 seconds of people being asked which is more dominant, which should dominate, the Constitution or Sharia law.
Your thoughts, should Sharia law supersede the U.S. Constitution?
No, but I think the Sharia law it's made by God, by Allah, and the Constitution is made by people. So it's not the same.
Do you believe that Sharia law should be above the U.S. Constitution?
Yes. Yes.
Should any religious law supersede the U.S. Constitution at any time? Any denomination?
Maybe in the future.
So you think that the U.S. Constitution should be the law of the land in the U.S.?
Also helpful to protect our Sharia.
Should Sharia law be over the U.S. Constitution?
Yes.
Maybe. Every country have a different policy and different law, but I respect the law in any country I go.
Do you believe that the tenets of Sharia law should be over the U.S. Constitution?
No.
That U.S. Constitution, which is made by people, and the Sharia law is made by Allah. So that is all the way above. That has to be definitely in the land, not for the America, for the whole world, would be above the
So
Sharia
that
law.
should be above the U.S.
Definitely.
Constitution?
Yes.
And you saw you got a whole bunch of different answers. Some said absolutely not. Some said Constitution should rule, but it should protect the Sharia. Others said Sharia definitely. We'll get to what the Sharia is in a bit. So these are some actually educated individuals giving an articulate answer. Now, a guy named Mark Dice does interviews on the beaches of San Diego. He asks the women, he hypothetically said, Hillary Clinton's going to put Sharia law into minority communities. What do you think? Here's a couple examples.
One of Hillary's primary campaign promises is to help expand the Sharia law program in minority communities in America. Do you think that's the right campaign platform to be running on?
Yeah.
The Sharia law expansion?
Yes, I'd say yes.
Just to change the way
I'm pro.
You think Hillary's plan for the Sharia law is the right thing? Is it the right time for that in America?
I don't know. I don't think it'd be a bad thing.
Would you support Hillary Clinton's Sharia law program? Do you think that's the right thing for the New World Order?
Sure. Yeah, I would.
This is what I refer to as ignorance. I don't know what I'm talking about, but someone said Hillary wants it, so it's okay. I will tell you, I'm against ignorance. I'm against closed-mindedness. On November 16th, I went to a Stop Islamophobia, Stop Racism forum in Fayetteville. I will tell you, it wasn't really about that. That's okay, because the Council on American Islamic Relations, worded very carefully, believes the definition is somebody who's close-minded and prejudiced and hates Islam and Muslims, and then shares that. I am against closed-mindedness and hatred, period, as all should be. In fact, that's why I'm up here with the local imam with his hand on my shoulder, and the speaker, very interestingly, got up, his first words were, I'm not an expert on the Quran. He later, during the Q&A, quoted the Quran. I knew the verse he was quoting, so I said, could you finish that verse? Because it goes on to say, cut off people's hands and feet, crucify them. And he didn't know it. It took him 30 seconds before someone actually, interesting conversation led when I actually asked them to know their own scripture. But he said, this guy, the speaker said, if you go to talk to any 89% of Muslims about what's in a particular verse in the Quran, they don't know it. Now, I've heard a lot of Christians are the same way, but I'll bet you if you ask a Christian, John 3:16 says what? They're going to know the answer. And I know that you're not going to get somebody quoting the Bible. So where'd you get that? I don't know. I just heard it somewhere. But he told me that people don't know the scriptures. And I'll tell you, it's important to know them. And this is where I'm going to do my foot stomping. You've all been to class that people stomp their foot. Important point. Today, I'm not talking about Muslims. Not talking about Muslims. Because Muslims, based on what I just told you he said, have a wide variety of beliefs. Based on the Pew Research, 81% of the U.S. say it's never okay to be violent. We're going to give them that credit that they have been taught certain things, and that's what they believe with their whole heart. They just don't know the parts that they don't know that you're going to learn today. Those are people, I'm not talking about them, I'm talking about the ones who know all of what I'm going to share with you today and want to use it to conquer us and, if needed, to then kill us. So we're going to start with Islamic scriptures. When somebody picks up, when someone says, what is the Christian scriptures? 99% of Christians say it's the Bible. Therefore, when I ask you, what are the Islamic scriptures, 99% of you are going to say it's the Quran. I'm going to tell you that's about 14% correct. But let me tell you about the Quran. It was broken up into two major writing periods. Very important what these periods were. It is organized, if you buy one at the store, they're typically organized numerically 1 to 114. Does that make sense? What you didn't know was they're organized by the length of the chapter, not when they were written. Genesis begins life, Revelation ends it. Chapter 2 is the 90th one written. Chapter 118 is about the 40th. You're not going to understand chronology if you pick up a Quran, unless especially done. Now, the first 64% were written in Mecca, when Muhammad was trying to win hearts and minds. That's where most of the verses you hear quoted come from. When Muhammad was trying to say, Jews, Christians, we're all the same. I just have the newest stuff that you haven't gotten yet. He won 150 converts with that theory. During that time period, he's also telling everyone in Mecca, by the way, if you don't join me because I'm the newest thing to our triumphant of religions, you're going to go to hell and burn forever. And everyone who ever preceded you is already there burning in hell. And this was a city that had 360 idols in the Kaaba, which is currently the center of all Muslim worship. So a very polytheistic, open environment. He told them they're all going to hell. After 13 years, they said, you need to leave. After he left, he wrote 24 more surahs, chapters, 6, 1/2 dozen of the other. It's all the same thing. He wrote 24 more surahs. The wording got different. The guidance became different. We'll talk about what they happened. Now, Islam sounds like a word that means peace. But according to the Quran, it is submission to God's will. Therefore, Islam is submission to God's will. A Muslim is one who submits. So here is what those chapters look like. The black numbers are 1 through 114, but the blue numbers are the ones that were written in Mecca. The red numbers were written in Medina, and you can tell the numbers don't make any sense numerically. What's important is chapter 9 is the last one written. I've seen guys with doctorates, I'll give them their credit. Some say 9 was last, some say 5 was last. 5 is the last one that talks about how a Muslim interacts with a non-believer at a personal level. Like 551 says, do not make friends with the unbelievers. Anyone who makes a friend with the unbelievers is as one of them. Which, if you read more doctrine, means I can kill you because you're an apostate. So that's personal. Chapter 9 talks about how to deal with non-believers at a military political level. Ambush them, make them submissive to you, that kind of thing. So here's what we talked about earlier. 13 years, 150 followers, goes to Medina, changes the tune of what he's saying, ends with 100,000 people, conquers all of the Arabian Peninsula. Within 100 years, they conquered from Spain to Pakistan because of what he taught, primarily in this period here. So whenever someone tells you, hey, the Quran says this nice, happy thing, either A, they're only quoting part of the verse, or B, they're probably quoting something from over here, when he was trying to win hearts and minds. Now, you know, I've got 4 little arrows on my chart there. Each of those is a reference to the term abrogation. Here's how abrogation works. Conceptually, for salvation in Christianity, the Old Testament says you had to sacrifice animals to get salvation. New Testament, Jesus Christ did that for you. Jesus Christ, for salvation, abrogated the Old Testament sacrifices. Same concept, the Quran abrogates all of the above. And later verses abrogate earlier verses. And so, if chapter 9 tells you to fight until everyone has called Allah the only God and Muhammad is his messenger, then this one over here could say, forgive them for not believing you. And that doesn't matter because that is abrogated by this one. So the guys I'm talking about who want to kill you Understand abrogation. Understand what's said last is most important. And what's said last is really pretty deadly stuff. And they understand that. Those who live amongst us, go to church, go to school with us, work with us, they don't buy into that philosophy. And I'm okay with that. You know, most of us believe, you believe what you want, I'll believe what I want, as long as we don't infringe on each other, we're good. Fully believe that. The guys I'm talking about don't believe that and believe that the last verses are more important than the first verses. But that's just one of the scriptures. Now it gets complicated because you've probably never heard this part before. In addition to the Quran, we have something called the Hadith. Picture, if you will, a story, little verse that's about this big, and it says, Muhammad was walking on the street one day, and you said to him, hey, what's the best thing? And he answered you, how do I brush my teeth? And Muhammad said so. A little story, short stories of what Muhammad said. And they were collected roughly 200 years after Muhammad died, and they fill in the gaps of the Quran. The Quran says you should pray. Hadith tell you how to pray. Hadith tell you very important, specific things. There are about 12 collections. 6 are considered authoritative. 3 are considered almost undeniable. In fact, I don't have the video with you today, but there's a guy who says if you hear from either Bukhari or Sahih Muslim, you can't disagree with it. So Bukhari is the most authoritative. He wrote 9 volumes of these hadith. Went to 300,000, would have done about 2,000 stories. Something he repeated about 9,000 stories. Sahih Muslim came shortly after. By the way, Sahih means authoritative. So Sahih, Bukhari, Sahih Muslim, and then Muslim came right after him, and then Sunnah Abu Dawud. So if you want to know what Muhammad was saying when he was walking around, because the Quran is supposed to be what Allah told the angel Gabriel to tell Muhammad. This is what Muhammad did and said, and it is just as important as anything else. We'll talk about that in a second. The second massive thing you don't know about is called the Sirah, commonly known as the life of Muhammad. This is what Muhammad did. It tells you simple stories like when they had a fight with some Jews, another tribe didn't back Muhammad like they had promised him they would. And so he gave one of his men, who was really about to die from the battle, and said, you can choose what to do with them. The guy said, kill all the men, take the women and kids as slaves. Muhammad's response to that was, you have said just what God would want. So Muhammad had the men brought out, small groups, and beheaded in the marketplace of Medina until 800 men were dead. And then they took the women and children as slaves. And stories like that come out of here. So that's the life of Muhammad. What did Muhammad actually do? Because if we're going to learn what he did is important to the devout Muslim who believes that they need to conquer the universe. The last one is called the Classic Manual of Islamic Sacred Law. My friends, this is a law book. It is dry, it is boring, it is chaptered by small letters, A through Z, and it is what says retaliation is required, except if your parents or grandparents, then it's okay to kill your kids if they dishonor the family. I've got that bookmark. But this is a law book, not easy reading, not fun reading. Don't recommend reading it, but knowing what it says is important. Because it is in essence Sharia law. It was written in 1360, but because all the governments on the planet are run by people, they realized that if they follow this to the letter, they wouldn't have much power, so they pick and choose the parts they like. That's why Sharia law will be different in every country. By the way, Saudi Arabia, when they follow the law that says you should crucify people, they will first behead them and then crucify the body. Still today, Saudi Arabia. So, this is what Muhammad received, said, and did. So, I'm telling you, Muhammad's an important guy. Here's why. Now, so here you have the little Quran. Here you have the law book, Reliance of the Traveler. Here you have the Hadith and the Sirah. The Hadith and the Sirah combined are called the Sunnah. One of my last speakers today is going to say, if it's in the Quran or if it's Sunnah, then we need to follow that guidance. Even if it's beheading, even if it's stoning to death or adultery, that's what we should do in the whole world. And you'll see the response he gets when he makes this statement. But the Sunnah is all of this put together minus, of course, the law books that came later. The Sunnah is Muhammad's example. So knowing that will make you wiser. First, I'm only going to cover one foundational principle today. I've got about 5 or 6 that you really need to know to fully understand what these guys want to do to us. First one, and the only one we're talking about today, is obey Muhammad. 4 principles tell you to obey Muhammad. 1, all the other prophets said, fear Allah, note the phrasing, fear Allah, obey me. Noah said it to the people at his time. They didn't fear him, they didn't obey him, they all died. Moses told that to Pharaoh. Pharaoh didn't fear God, fear Allah, and obey Moses. Pharaoh's firstborn were killed, his army was wiped out. Lot told the people around him, according to the Quran, the same concept. Fear Allah, obey me. They didn't. Sodom and Gomorrah were wiped out. So, first storyline is examples. Second one is carrot and stick. If you fear Allah, obey Muhammad, you get to go to heaven and paradise. If you don't, quite simply, you're going to burn the fire. The third one is, read the wording on this. You have no opinion if Allah or Muhammad has made a statement. You get no opinion. In fact, one of my speakers is going to use the phrase, I have no opinion on this. Because if Muhammad received it in the Quran, if he did it in the Hadith, if he said it or did it in the Hadith, or if he did it or said it in the Sirah, a good practicing Muslim is also required to do the same. By the way, in Sahih Muslim, book 1, verse 33, Muhammad said, I have been ordered to fight until all admit that Allah is the only God and Muhammad is his messenger. That wasn't a short-term, so take that village. That's the eternal command. Therefore, those who believe in what I'm telling you they believe will have to fight until then. The last one is Muhammad is the example to follow. Remember I told you this says what he did and what he said? You have to follow the example. And so therefore, if he did it, you should do it too. So when he had a Jew tied down and had a fire built in the guy's chest because he wanted to get a treasure in the guy's village, and when the guy didn't give anything up and was about to die, Muhammad had his head cut off, then that's okay for you to do too. Because Muhammad did it. You should do it too. So this is a critically important principle to understand the mindset of those who are conducting attacks in the United States. The couple in San Bernardino understood this concept. All right, but that was then, in 1430 years ago. What do Islamic scholars believe today about that principle in Egypt?
الصور التي تعامل بها النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم المسلمون يسعهم حسب حالهم أن يطبقوا نوعا منها. الرسول صلى الله عليه وسلم عقد صلحا بلا جزية مع اليهود أول ما أتى المدينة، فكان هذا أمرا عندما يحتاج إليه، وعندما نقضوا العهد قتله وفرض الجزية على أهل الكتاب في آخر الأمر. وارد ممكن يعامل هؤلاء النصارى كما عومل يهود المدينة، هذا وارد.
So there you go. Muhammad did Medina. He imposed the taxes. He did the stuff. So we can do the same to the Jews in Egypt today. He talks about the jizya. We'll get back to that later. It was a humiliation tactic. That's the topic I talk about in different days. And you have the people of the book. Here's the secret. The Jews and the Christians were called the people of the book because in the Arabian Peninsula in 620, no other religion had a book. So these two religions had a book. That made them the people of the book. That's sexy. Okay, Sharia law. The problem is not Muslims, it's the Sharia. So what do scholars believe about live and let live? You preach your religion, I'll preach mine, and we'll just get along that way.
ديمقراطية وهذه اتفاقات ديمقراطية موجودة وكن ديمقراطية. أنت تنشر عندي أنا أنشر عندك تبعت سرايا أبعت سرايا
أنا
كذا يعني.
أنا موافق أن أنا أكون ديمقراطي.
يعني
أنا كرجل مسلم.
بتعددية الآراء
لا
مثلا يعني.
أنا رجل مسلم.
نعم.
أنا رجل مسلم. خاطبني بما يملي علي ديني.
أسمح أنت أيضا بنشر أفكارهم
لا أسمح أبدا لأنني مأمور. لو كان الرأي لي لتكلمت لكن الله أمرني. قال قاتلهم حتى لا تكون فتنة.
Not to have an opinion. All this is fight them until there's no strife. That's in chapter 8, by the way, of the Quran. Fight them until there's no strife. what they think of Britain.
No to democracy, no to freedom, no to democracy. Democracy, go to hell.
Democracy, go to hell.
Democracy, go to hell.
Democracy, go to hell.
We don't need your democratic system. We have the Sharia of Ar-Rahman. It's our belief as Muslims. We believe in the Sharia of Islam.
So clearly there are those who believe Sharia law should be what is dominant in society, whoever society there is. So let's start comparing now the Constitution with Sharia law. Because most of us don't know what Sharia is, and that's okay because it doesn't dictate our life. Why would we know? So start with the Constitution. Constitution is the supreme law of the land. Article 6. We all cherish that statement. Sharia law, as two of the guys in the street version said, is Allah's law. Therefore, anything else is made by man, and therefore is subordinate. To help drive that home, this is a, if you will, a Sunday school book for Muslims from 9th to 12th grade. The final chapter in this book is called Fiqh and Sharia. Fiqh is Islamic jurisprudence. So let me read a couple things. Sharia is Islamic way. The word Sharia literally means a straight path or an endless supply of water. I'm thinking they're talking about the straight path and what directs them. When you follow the Islamic way of living life, you are following Sharia. And finally, we end up with Islam is not based on superstitions or the whims of evil men. It is based on the eternal principles of Allah. So I'm teaching my high schoolers and junior hires that Sharia law and the Islamic way of life is from God, the Constitution is from man. Given the option, who should you follow? And many of them have clearly chosen that Sharia law outweighs the Constitution. In fact, our friends ISIS, the Islamic State, if you've heard the phrase ISIL versus ISIS, and you've heard ISIS is Iraq and Syria, wash that from your brain. I have a map I can show you that ISIS put out that shows the region we call the Levant, they call it Al-Sham, and it shows that as one of their provinces someday. So when ISIS talks about Al-Sham, they're talking about that entire region that we call the Levant. Westerners don't know what Al-Sham is. I didn't know what Al-Sham is. I had to go look it up. I knew what the Levant was. So that's why Westerners use that term. By the way, I refer to them in most everything I do. When I talk about the overall organization, I call them the Islamic State. They took that name in July of 2014. We denied it to them, except give them too much legitimacy. After watching somebody who had sworn loyalty to the Islamic State's leader, al-Baghdadi, massacre people in San Bernardino, after watching 8 operatives, I'll get to that in a minute, wipe out hundreds of people in Paris on a mission directed from the Islamic State, I think they're beyond the Levant in Iraq. By the way, they have 9 provinces from West Africa to the east to Asia. I call them the Islamic State. Now, when I talk about what's going on in Iraq and Syria, I'll call them ISIL, because that's where those guys are fighting. The organization is properly called the Islamic State. But they wrote a magazine every month or so, and they said, we're even better at obeying Sharia law than Al-Qaeda is, because Al-Qaeda does not charge the jizya tax to the poor people in areas they control, and we do. So Sharia is important to these guys, and we'll talk about jizya in a minute. Okay, let's start with the First Amendment. 2 major clauses: establishment of religion and free exercise thereof. The U.S. Constitution says you can't abridge that. However, in Sharia law, this is Reliance of the Traveler, the law book I showed you. Bukhari talked about him, and in the Quran, they say if you leave Islam, you should be killed. I'm thinking the free exercise of your religion has just been wiped out. Additionally, non-Muslims are allowed to live if you subordinate yourself to them, or unless you convert. We'll come back to that in a minute. So clearly there's no freedom of religion. By the way, if you don't do those 2 things, they need to kill you. And it's in the book, chapter 9, verse 29. And non-Muslims must not be able to display crosses. There's a whole thing called the Pact of Umar, written in 637 in Syria. And I talked about that extensively on other occasions. And it lays out what the Christians can and cannot. They have to wear different clothing, have to wear different shoes, have to have the forehead shaved. The Muslim says, let me in your house. You say, okay, put him up, feed him for 3 days. He sleeps in your bed while you sleep on the floor. And that ended up taking Turkey from a Christian country to a Muslim country because everyone got tired of being subordinated and humiliated, which is what Chapter 929 says to do. So that's religion. Freedom of speech, surely there's no difference there. Small and minor, right? The guy says small and minor differences? All right, freedom of speech in the Constitution cannot be abridged. Now, drawing animals or living things is forbidden in Islam, according to Sharia law. Muhammad said so. It's in the books. Drums, stringed instruments are forbidden. By the way, Paris attack, the most casualties were committed during what? A rock concert, held in a Jewish-owned facility. Not on accident. Again, references to exactly why those things are illegal. And if you say or write things that are offensive about Islam, Muhammad, or Allah, you are to be killed or at least severely punished. There's some leniency in what you can punish them with. But can you say Charlie Hebdo? Okay, clearly the small minor differences are now chasms. So here we go. This is Paris. 8 people broke into the 3 teams, conducted assaults on 6 different locations, wiping out hundreds and wounding hundreds more. 8 people dedicated to their cause. Admin note, gun-free zone. But dedicated to cause based on Sharia law that I just showed you. Charlie Hebdo, earlier this year, again, what they did was horrific, but it was directed by Muhammad and Allah, and therefore they had no opinion of their own. They had to do it all the time. Thank God they do. All right, 8th Amendment. We've got 2 parts of the 8th Amendment. First, excessive fines. Talked about jizya before. Again, Quran 929. If you're just, I've got some flyers to talk about Sharia law. 929 says, fight those who believe not in Allah until they pay the jizya tax with willing submission and feel themselves subdued. Jizya tax, the standard was set by Muhammad when he conquered a Jewish town. They submitted to him. He took the best of everything they had, and then from then on, they had to give him half of everything they made. That's the standard. So we talked about the maximum. According to Sharia law in the law book, it's whatever the 2 sides agree upon. Well, I just conquered you. Guess what? We agree to what I say. And so that's the max standard. The minimum standard is the grams of gold, which as of last night around 11:30, $144 a year. And that's what the Al-Qaeda guys were not charging in ISIS. We're really upset about that. Required if you want to live. Again, you have 3 options. 1, they'll offer to invite you to convert. Always what they do. 2, if you do not convert and you're a Christian or a Jew, everyone else is pretty much exempt from this statement. You can stay and pay the jizya tax, wear the funky clothes, and be subordinated. Publicly humiliated. Option 3, we are now commanded to fight you, and it's your fault we have to fight and kill you because we gave you 2 options.
Is that true with the different sects within Muslims?
Depend, for a large extent, yeah. Shia are considered almost apostates by a lot of Sunnis, and therefore, because they're a minority, they don't like the Sunnis very much either. Other groups, the Alawites kind of are a localized version, a different version of it. They're also just basically considered polytheists and not Judeo-Christian. Therefore, you have an option: convert, or I have to fight you, and it's your fault. Second part, punishment. No cruel and unusual punishment. Definition has changed over the last 250 years, but in the Sharia law, if you commit adultery, fornication, or sodomy, you're to be stoned to death, flogged, or thrown from the building. Interesting story, the thrown from the building comes from Dawood, in which Muhammad said, throw them from your house. Reading different translations of it, he meant kick them out. No. But what did he say? Throw them from your home. They take them on top of buildings and throw them off. They take it literally. If it says it, I do it. I don't have an option, right? I don't have an option. He said throw, I throw. That's where they get that from. But it's out there. Interesting note, a man and woman were caught in adultery. I want to say it's in Saudi Arabia, but it was in a nation. And the legal punishment was she was killed, he was whipped. because Sharia law is not exactly equal. Spreading corruption on the earth. Chapter 5, verse 32, you will frequently hear quoted, if you kill a man, you've killed all mankind. Okay, that's the verse I alluded to earlier. That is 4 words out of a very long verse, and then that verse continues to say, unless they commit murder or spread corruption in the earth. The next verse says, the penalty for those who fight Allah, fight his messenger, or spread corruption on the earth is that they'll be killed or crucified, your option, and have their hands and feet cut off on the opposite side. Now that's the Quran. The Hadith tell you that what that really means is if you steal, I cut off your right hand. You steal again, I'm cutting off your left foot. You steal again, cutting off your left hand. You steal again, I'm cutting off your right foot. If you steal again, I'm just going to stone you to death because I just can't deal with you anymore. And a guy in Egypt last year put his hands across the railroad track and had a train cut his hands off because he couldn't stop stealing, and he knew Sharia law told him to have his hands and feet cut off. And the state wouldn't do it for him. Again, I'm saying that that's not 95% compatible, right? Small, no, chasm differences. Sharia law, 8th Amendment. You guys remember this? The whole world's going, they burned the guy in the cage. They've done a lot worse since then. But let's look at what they did to this guy. He was a pilot of a jet. They dropped bombs, which burn, and if you're inside, you burn, and you're probably not dead when you start burning, and then the buildings crumble on you. So what did they do? They burned him like he did to the people he bombed, and then they dumped the building on him like his bombs did to the people. Exact retaliation in kind, exactly in line with the rights of the traveler. Sharia law in practice. All right. Now, most of the things I've shown you are either 1,400 years old or people in the Middle East for the most part. Let's take a look at how people envision Sharia law. We'll start with Norway.
I will ask you, everyone in the room, how many of you are normal Muslims? You're not extremists, you're not radical, this is normal Sunni Muslims. Please raise your hands. Everybody, mashallah, subhanallah. Okay, take down your hands again. How many of you agree that the punishments described in the Quran and the Sunnah, whether it is death, whether it is stoning for adultery, whatever it is, if it is from Allah and His Messenger, that is the best punishment ever possible for humankind. And that is what we should apply in the world. Who agrees with that? Allahu Akbar. Are you all radical extremists? Subhanallah.
You heard him say Allahu Akbar? A friend of mine named John McCain once said Allahu Akbar just means thank God. Like Christians would say, saying thank God. I've got videos, I usually do that one and then this next video where a guy says, Allahu Akbar, America. Allahu Akbar, Germany. Allahu Akbar, tyrants. I'm thinking he's not saying thank God for tyrants, thank God for America. Allahu Akbar means God is greater. Our God is greater than everyone else. Our religion is greater. We are greater. What we do is to show our dominance over you. Again, not talking about Muslims, talking about the guys who take this stuff seriously enough to act upon it. All right, what do they say in America?
I find that there are only two things which are open to our movements. Ballot or bullet, nothing in between.
Democracy, the black people's freedom. No, we don't want them to sacrifice Islam. We want to Islamize democracy.
Our job is to change the Constitution of America.
So, they want to Islamize democracy and change the Constitution of America. They would never do that. That'd be ridiculous, right? Well, in June, Supreme Court made a decision, 8-1 decision in favor of a woman. Abercrombie & Fitch, by the way, I didn't know them very well. I didn't know Abercrombie & Fitch. They did clothing. I went to their website after this case came out. They don't exactly have a very conservative dress attire. They're very attracted to the young who want to show off some skin. Woman applied for a job, was accepted, then said, by the way, I have to wear my conservative clothing at all times, because that's part of my religious belief. They said, hello, this is what we wear. You know, we're trying to attract people to wear things that don't look like this. So no, you can't do that and work on the floor. Well, she sued them, and the Supreme Court said, you know what? It's her religion, she can wear whatever she wants to. In essence, slowly, over time, give it time, you will not be able to tell anybody they can't wear a hijab in situations where security is really important. And then it'll go into the whole Naqib thing, and then it'll, you know, the thing where all you see is a slit of the eyes. And that's where a lot of the men are sneaking around in the Middle East today. They're dressing like the women. Eventually, this is going to come to you guys, because they're going to get more and more of this until you no longer have the right to secure the people you're securing. This is how they're doing what they want to do. Now, they don't stop with just clothing. New Jersey this year, there's a holiday called the Eid al-Adha. By the way, Eid al-Adha started with the Jews celebrating the day that Abraham took Isaac and was going to offer him on the sacrifice, and God said, stop. Muhammad said, what are you guys doing? They said, we're celebrating this feast. And he says, oh yeah, well, I've got a bigger claim to Abraham than you do. This is not one of our feasts. And they, of course, in Islam, it's Ishmael, not Isaac.
I was going to ask you about.
Yeah, it's Ishmael, not Isaac. But they basically claim the holiday. So picture this, go to a school board on Wednesday of this week. Let's pretend today's Wednesday, okay? And they went to the school board and said, hey, next Thursday is our holiday. I want the entire school district shut down next Thursday. If you don't shut it down, I'm upset. And the school board said, next Thursday? Hello? Yeah, I don't think so. Although the city council had already said they liked it. So the school board said no. With that in mind, next week we want you to shut the entire school district down. This is how they responded when they were told no.
From Jersey City's Muslim community, a walkout as this city's school board debated and indicated it would not close the schools on Thursday of next week for the Eid al-Adha feast of sacrifice holy day.
We feel alienated from the Board of Education. We feel alienated from this system.
We're no longer the minority. That's clear from tonight. We're going to be the majority soon.
And then there was a fairness issue raised by the Jewish community, which does not get days off for Rosh Hashanah or Yom Kippur. School board members did make clear that Muslim children can have an excused religious absence for the Eid holiday next week.
So you can have the day off if you need to, but we're not shutting the whole school board down, and they were alienated by it. They want to Islamize democracy and change the Constitution one step at a time. And they've been doing this for 1,400 years, so they're in no hurry. So I come back to, why do I talk to security people about the beliefs of people who want to instill their Constitution over ours? It's really what it is. Because it impacts you. As I started with, people who believe that they need to instigate this across the globe are going to start causing problems here and there. As you know, the FBI has over 900 cases in all 50 states right now that are open. Roughly 60 people this year have been arrested associated with just ISIS. And again, I'm telling you, ISIS isn't the problem. It's a much larger problem than just ISIS. Now, your neighborhood Muslims may not believe all of that. They may have been told that their religion teaches them to love each other and love other people. And I'm all over that. That's great. But if they read the whole doctrine and believe that they don't have a choice, they would take a different perspective. And so I'm here to tell you that you just always need to be aware that there are people right now living in your community who believe it's their job, when the time is right, to take people out on behalf of what they've been commanded to do. Now here's your challenge. There are ways of identifying people who've been radicalized. They start wearing clothes differently, they maybe start growing the beard out, they start coloring their beard red. But here's the problem. ISIS knew that, and they came out with a magazine called How to Survive in the West. earlier this year. And the first chapter is how not to be identified. And it starts with, if you haven't grown a beard, don't grow a beard. If you've got a beard, don't shave it off. Don't change your clothes, look like everyone else. Talk like everyone else. So all the things I could have told you to look for as security threats, they specifically said don't do those things. Which is how a couple who were clearly radicalized years ago were able to be given a baby shower and then turn around and at a Christmas party wipe out their staff. Because they believed in the doctrine that Muhammad taught, which is how they conquered the planet at one point. Had it not been for Vienna, they may have conquered Europe in 1638. But this is why it's important to you. Don't look, my response to people who ask, well, what do I do? I always will tell you, love the people. Love the people. Stop the doctrine. Protect your constitutional right. Protect people around you's constitutional rights. Don't let the doctrine take hold, because the doctrine itself, if allowed to fester to what it wants to do, will turn this country into a Muslim country. That is their objective. Now, just for fun, can any of you identify where this building is found? That's the Islamic Center of America in Dearborn, Michigan, the largest such facility on the continent. And one of the larger concentrations of Muslims. America talks about 63% are immigrants. Yeah, large concentration there. So, my friends, I'm glad I could cheer you up today. But I will tell you that this is something that has legs. It's not just a bunch of radical, Christians or right-wingers who are saying they're all out to kill us. But that's not true. They're not all out to kill us. But I will tell you, if you tell me it's something horrible that they did, I can show you a reference where either Muhammad did it, or he directed it to be done, or worse yet, it came straight from Allah, and they were told to do it. And so the ones whom we live with and love haven't bought into all of that, and that's great. But the ones who live around us and have bought into it pose a threat, and we need to be aware of that.